Well, we're very pleased to have with us today Bob Ottenhoff, who is the president and CEO of Guidestar. And if you don't know Guidestar, you must. Guidestar is one of the principal forms for information on the not-for-profit sector in the United States and through its affiliates around the world. So thank you very much for being with us today, Bob.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Now, I know that you've just come through another in a series of surveys. It's the nonprofit fundraising study. And I wanted to ask you a bit about the survey and then see if we could drill down into some of the results. Can you tell us first about the survey?
Sure. So we've been trying to keep our pulse on the nonprofit sector and particularly about fundraising now for the last few years. And for this last survey, we partnered with some other organizations. And this was done for the first 9 months of this year. So we could then compare it to the last few years to see how things we're doing this year compared to other years.
Okay, terrific. And what are the key findings out of this year's report?
Well, it's a mixed bag, I think is a way to say it. And in some ways, it's not surprising given the mixed bag of the economy in general, right? We started off the year thinking 2011 was going to be much better than 2010, and then things started to deteriorate, and now that we get to the end of the year, there seems to be a little hope bubbling, although I guess if I had to put a headline on it, the economy, I'd say uncertainty. And so that's how most nonprofits are feeling right now, is they've got some reasons to hope, but a lot depends on how the last few weeks turn out. And what we found for the first 9 months, which is the results from this survey, was a little less than half, about 41%, were projecting that this year was going to be better in terms of charitable giving than last year. So, and that also depends on where your charity is located. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a state where the real estate has been really bad the last few years, like California or Florida or Arizona, you may be less optimistic, let's say, than if you're in North Dakota, where they seem to be growing oil wells.
Right.
And the same thing is about the type of charity. Some charities, some subsectors are doing better than others.
Now, I know that in the report you talked a lot about, in the press release, half empty versus half full ways of viewing this stuff, and that's probably true with respect to the size of charity as well as where they're located. Can you tell us a bit about how smaller charities are being impacted?
Yeah, that was an interesting result here. Smaller charities, and for this survey we said those with less than $3 million in total expenditures, were much less likely to report increased fundraising results and much more likely to be pessimistic about how they thought 2012 was going to turn out.
Now, and just to put that in perspective, what percentage roughly of charities in the U.S. would be $3 million or under in terms of revenues?
Quite a few. So it's a little bit like the 80-20 here. 20% of the charities are big, like let's say over 10 million, and but they generate maybe 80% of the revenue. So it's a very long tail,
right,
in the nonprofit sector.
Now, of course, the economy has been a big factor in everybody's business and every nonprofit's life. It's been problematic for people who are thinking about the local economies to raise money for a local charity. Are there any kind of infrastructure issues attendant with having a smaller charity that may be inhibiting them from raising more money at this time? I mean, are they raising more money from sources that are less successful in this economic cycle, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I guess so an obvious first answer would be capabilities and capacities. You can only do so much, and the skill sets of your organization may be less than what would be somewhere else. But I think in these times, another issue for small organizations is flexibility, adaptability. And I think larger nonprofits are more likely to have a diverse funding mix. They're more likely to be able to appeal in different ways to different demographics. And I think that's a growing issue. My grandfather's not going to text in a pledge.
Right.
Right? But that's a growing source of revenue for some. And so I think in today's world, you need to have different tools for different demographics and different approaches. And I think coupled with that flexibility is also adaptability. And this is one of the things I'm really focusing on is how do we build strong organizations? And part of it is they need to be able to adapt to changing winds and changing fortunes and changing conditions in the broader economy.
Well, this may be putting you on the spot, but in light of that, are there a couple of things that you'd recommend to charities looking forward to 2012 to help them be more versatile and more successful in raising money?
Well, yeah, so I think they need to really get to learn who are their donors and be able to segment them by type. What is motivating people to make a contribution to their organization, and what are the characteristics of those market segments? That would be one thing I would suggest. We have, just did some landmark work this year with Hope Consulting on data and what are the data needs of donors. And one of the things that came out of that was that donors want to do the right thing in terms of giving money to the right organization, but they don't always know how to do it. And so we as nonprofits need to help them out by telling them a little bit more about our organizations and being not only transparent and accountable, which is almost now mandatory. I would say it probably is mandatory, but talking a little bit more about the effectiveness of our organizations, being able to tell how successful we are in whatever our cause happens to be. And I'd say if there's anything, that's what donors are thinking about now. As money gets tighter, as demand for services gets greater, people want to know that they're getting value for their pledge dollar, and that the organization they're going to give it to is really going to accomplish something. So
understand your donors and make a case that works for them. That's
exactly
pretty compelling. Well,
right.
Thank you very much for giving us some insights on this year's survey. If people want to take a look for this, where is the best place to find it?
Well, you can go to the Guidestar site and just look for the survey. There's a link to it, and it'll give you all the results.
Well, thank you not only for today, but for everything that you do at Guidestar for all of us in this sector. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Okay.